I'm Eleanor Hayes, 68 years old, and never in my life did I imagine my own daughter would demand money for visiting the house I gave her. When Stephanie screamed, "You will pay me $1,500 a month or stop coming over," I felt my heart shatter into a million pieces. I simply turned around and walked away without a word. Little did she know what would happen next. The property transfer had one tiny flaw that would change everything. Before I continue my story, where are you watching from today? Hit that subscribe button and join me on this journey through the most painful decision I ever had to make. Life hadn't always been this complicated between Stephanie and me. Once upon a time, we were inseparable, especially after my husband Frank died from a sudden heart attack when our daughter was just 12 years old. The memory of that rainy Tuesday morning still haunts me, having to sit my little girl down and tell her daddy wasn't coming home. From that moment on, it was just the two of us against the world. I started my career as a secretary at Hartford Real Estate, typing letters and answering phones while trying to juggle single motherhood. Those early years were a constant struggle, but I was determined to provide stability for Stephanie. I'd wake up at 5 in the morning to prepare her lunch, work until 6 in the evening, then come home to help with homework and household chores. Weekends were spent at Stephanie's soccer games or ballet recitals, cheering louder than any other parent to make up for the empty seat beside me. Through sheer determination and countless late nights, I climbed the corporate ladder from secretary to administrative assistant, then to office manager, and finally to executive director of operations. Each promotion meant better pay and improved circumstances for Stephanie, but also longer hours and more responsibility. Despite the financial improvements in our lives, I maintained a modest lifestyle, putting most of my earnings into Stephanie's education fund and our future security. "Mom, you don't need to shop at discount stores anymore," teenage Stephanie would complain when I'd clip coupons or hunt for sales. "We can afford better things now." But living through financial hardship had taught me valuable lessons about money management that I tried to instill in her. "Just because we can afford something doesn't mean we should buy it," I'd explain while putting back an overpriced sweater she'd selected. As Stephanie entered her high school years, I noticed subtle changes in her attitude. The sweet, appreciative child who once wrote me thank you notes for the smallest gestures began to expect certain privileges as her due. When her friends got cars for their 16th birthdays, she assumed she would too. And not just any car, but something comparable to what the wealthy kids in her school drove. "Everyone else's parents are getting them nice cars," she argued when I showed her the reliable but unflashy sedan I'd selected. "Why do I have to be seen in this embarrassing thing?" I chalked it up to normal teenage behavior, and hoped college would mature her perspective. I'd worked so hard to ensure she could attend any university she chose without the burden of student loans. When acceptance letters came in, Stephanie selected Westridge University, one of the most expensive private schools in the state. I was proud but concerned about the social environment she'd be entering. During college, Stephanie's sense of entitlement blossomed in the fertile soil of privilege. She joined a sorority populated by daughters of executives and politicians, adopting their tastes and expectations. Our phone conversations increasingly centered around her complaints about what other parents provided that I didn't. It was during her junior year that she met Robert Caldwell, the son of a banking family with old money and older pretensions. Robert was handsome, charming, and accustomed to the finer things in life without having worked for any of them. When Stephanie brought him home during spring break, I noticed how his eyes cataloged the modest furnishings of my home with barely disguised disdain. "Your mother's place is quaint," he told Stephanie within my earshot, as though I couldn't possibly understand the subtle insult in his tone. Despite my reservations, Stephanie and Robert married shortly after graduation. I paid for a wedding that was far more lavish than I felt comfortable with, but I wanted her day to be special. Robert's parents contributed only a token amount, despite their considerable wealth, claiming they were investing in the couple's future through other means, a promise that never seemed to materialize. After 35 years at Hartford Real Estate, I finally retired at 62 with a comfortable pension and substantial savings. My financial advisor confirmed I was in excellent shape for retirement, and with his guidance, I decided to purchase a vacation home in Willow Creek, a charming 4-bedroom house with a garden that reminded me of my childhood home. I visited occasionally but found it sat empty most of the year, though I maintained it meticulously. Meanwhile, Stephanie and Robert rented an expensive apartment downtown, regularly complaining about the cost of living. Robert worked sporadically in positions his father arranged at various financial institutions, never lasting more than a year at any of them. Stephanie had secured a marketing job, but took frequent leaves of absence for stress management. Their lifestyle consistently exceeded their income, a fact they seemed oblivious to or willfully ignored. The one bright spot in this situation was my grandson Timothy. Born 2 years after their wedding, he seemed to have inherited none of his parents' entitlement. Even as a young boy, he showed a sensitivity and awareness that amazed me. When I'd visit their apartment, Timothy would notice if I looked tired and offer me his special cushion for comfort. Unlike his parents, he always thanked me genuinely for gifts, however small. "Grandma," he once asked when he was 8, "did you have to work hard to buy things when you were young?" "Yes, sweetheart," I answered. "Very hard." He nodded solemnly. "That's what I thought." Mom and Dad never talk about working hard, just about deserving things. Out of the mouths of babes comes wisdom that adults would do well to heed. The idea to gift Stephanie and Robert my vacation house came after a particularly dramatic phone call. Stephanie was in tears about their landlord raising the rent again, and Robert was bellowing in the background about the highway robbery of current housing prices. "We'll never be able to afford a decent house in this market," Stephanie sobbed. "We're stuck paying someone else's mortgage forever, while living in a place that's too small for us." I thought about my beautiful vacation property sitting empty most of the year. I was getting older, and the thought of simplifying my responsibilities held increasing appeal. Besides, wouldn't it be wonderful to provide security for my daughter and her family? After careful consideration and consultation with my financial advisor, I made the decision to give them the house in Willow Creek. The property was no small gift. A 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom craftsman-style home on a quarter-acre lot in a desirable neighborhood. Conservative estimates valued it at $650,000. The house featured hardwood floors throughout, a renovated kitchen with granite countertops, a spacious master suite, and a beautifully landscaped garden with mature fruit trees. I'd spent considerable time and resources ensuring the property was in pristine condition, from the roof to the foundation and everything in between. When I called Stephanie to tell her about my decision, there was a moment of stunned silence followed by squeals of excitement so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "Mom, are you serious? You're giving us your vacation house? The one in Willow Creek with the amazing garden? Oh my God, Robert. Mom's giving us her house."
I smilte her enthusiasm.
"Yes, sweetheart. I've already spoken with my attorney to prepare the paperwork. The house will be yours free and clear. I can't believe this. When can we move in? Can we see it this weekend?" "Oh, Mom, this is the most amazing thing ever." That Saturday, I met them at the property with my attorney Barbara, who brought the deed transfer documents. I'll never forget the look on Stephanie's face when we pulled into the driveway. Her eyes widened, taking in the flowering dogwood trees lining the walkway and the charming front porch with its swing. "It's even more beautiful than I remembered," she whispered, squeezing my hand. We walked through each room, with Stephanie and Robert excitedly discussing where their furniture would go and what changes they might make. Timothy ran from room to room, ultimately declaring the upstairs bedroom with the window seat would be his reading castle. "I can't wait to plant vegetables in the garden, Mom," Stephanie said, surprising me with this show of interest in something I loved. "You'll have to teach me everything you know about gardening." In the dining room, Barbara laid out the paperwork while I uncorked a bottle of champagne. "This is a significant gift," Barbara explained professionally. "Eleanor is transferring full ownership to both of you. She's even prepaid the property taxes for this year." Robert scanned the documents with unusual attention. "This is incredibly generous," he said, sounding sincere for once. "We're truly grateful, Eleanor." As they signed the papers, I felt a warm glow of satisfaction. This was what I'd worked so hard for all these years, to provide security and happiness for my family. After the paperwork was complete, we toasted with champagne and apple juice for Timothy, and I handed them the keys with a ribbon tied around them. "Welcome home," I said, feeling tears prick my eyes. That evening, we celebrated with dinner at a nice restaurant in town. Stephanie kept reaching over to hug me spontaneously. I still can't believe you did this for us, Mom. This changes everything for us. Now Timothy will grow up in a real home with space to play in his own room," Robert added, ruffling his son's hair. "And you'll always have a place to visit," Stephanie said. "Anytime you want to stay over, your room will be waiting." I was touched by this explicit invitation, and the thought that they had already designated a room for me in their new home. It seemed that my gift had not only provided them with housing security, but had also fostered a renewed closeness between us. Over the next few weeks, I helped them move in and get settled. I taught Stephanie about the care of the various plants in the garden, showed her how to operate the somewhat temperamental dishwasher, and shared all the little quirks that come with an older home. She seemed genuinely interested and appreciative of my knowledge. "Mom, you've thought of everything," she marveled when I showed her the detailed home maintenance binder I'd created, complete with warranty information, service records, and seasonal maintenance schedules. I visited every couple of weeks, usually bringing something for the house, new towels for the guest bathroom, kitchenware, or plants for the garden. It gave me joy to see them making the house their own, painting some rooms and rearranging furniture to suit their tastes. During these early visits, I did notice a few concerning comments. When discussing property taxes for the following year, Stephanie seemed shocked at the amount. "That's ridiculous. Why should we have to pay so much just to live in our own house?" she complained. "Property taxes fund schools, roads, and local services," I explained. "It's part of homeownership." "Well, it seems unfair. Maybe you could help us with that next year too," she suggested with a laugh that didn't quite mask her seriousness. Similarly, when the water heater needed routine maintenance, Robert grumbled about the endless expenses of homeownership. "No wonder you were so ready to give this place up," he said with a chuckle that felt vaguely accusatory. I brushed these comments aside, attributing them to the adjustment period of becoming first-time homeowners. Everyone experiences some sticker shock when they realize all the costs involved in maintaining a house. They would adapt and learn, just as I had when I bought my first home decades ago. What mattered was that my daughter and her family now had a beautiful, stable home where they could build memories and security. Timothy, especially, seemed to thrive in the new environment, proudly showing me new books arranged on his shelves and the bird feeder he'd set up outside his window. "Grandma," he confided during one of my visits, "I think this is the happiest our family has ever been." His words reassured me that I had made the right decision. Despite the occasional concerning comment from Stephanie or Robert, I believed the gift of the house would ultimately strengthen our family bonds and provide the stability they needed to flourish. How wrong I would turn out to be. 6 months after gifting the house, I received an invitation to celebrate my 68th birthday at Stephanie and Robert's home. I was touched by the gesture, imagining an intimate family dinner where we could relax and enjoy each other's company in the beautiful space they now called home. I arrived precisely at the agreed time of 6 o'clock, a small overnight bag in hand since Stephanie had suggested I stay in my room afterward. The driveway was already filled with unfamiliar cars, and as I approached the front door, I could hear multiple voices and laughter from inside. Apparently, this was not the quiet family dinner I had envisioned. I rang the doorbell and waited. And waited. Finally, Timothy opened the door, his face lighting up when he saw me. "Grandma, you're here." He threw his arms around my waist. "Mom said you might not come." "Not come to my own birthday dinner?" I asked, confused. "Why would she think that?" Timothy shrugged. "They've been busy setting up for ages. There are lots of people here." Indeed there were. As Timothy led me through to the back patio, I counted at least 20 guests, most of whom I didn't recognize. Stephanie was holding court near the outdoor bar, a glass of wine in hand, wearing a dress I knew cost more than my monthly pension payment. "Mom!" she called when she finally noticed me hovering uncertainly by the sliding door. "You made it." "Everyone, this is my mother." A few people nodded politely in my direction before returning to their conversations. Robert was grilling steaks on the barbecue I had purchased for them as a housewarming gift, barely acknowledging my presence with a distracted wave. "Happy birthday," Stephanie said, giving me a quick hug that smelled of expensive perfume. "Help yourself to drinks. We'll do cake later." With that, she was gone back to her friends, leaving me standing alone. Timothy stayed by my side, becoming my unofficial guide to the party. Who are all these people? I asked him quietly. Mom and Dad's friends from the club, he explained. They joined last month. Dad says it's important to network with the right people now that we have a house in this neighborhood. I nodded, wondering how they were affording country club membership when they had previously complained about basic household expenses. As I made my way around the gathering, I overheard snippets of Stephanie's conversation with a woman in an ostentatious diamond necklace. The house is just perfect for entertaining, Stephanie was saying. We've been renovating bits and pieces to put our stamp on it. You were so smart to buy in this neighborhood before prices went up even more, the woman replied. Yes, we really timed the market perfectly, Stephanie agreed, not bothering to correct the assumption that they had purchased the property. I felt a small sting at this omission but told myself not to be petty. Perhaps she simply didn't want to explain the complicated dynamics of gift-giving to casual acquaintances. Still, as the evening progressed and I heard her refer to our investment in Willow Creek, and when we bought this place several more times, the sting deepened into a genuine hurt. The birthday cake, when it finally appeared around 9:30, was clearly an afterthought. A small store-bought confection with happy birthday written in generic script, not even including my name. The guests, most of whom had been drinking steadily since my arrival, sang a distracted version of the birthday song before immediately returning to their conversations. I went home that night instead of staying over, claiming a headache. Neither Stephanie nor Robert tried very hard to convince me otherwise. 2 weeks later, I decided to make an unannounced visit, hoping to catch them at home for a more personal interaction. As I pulled into the driveway, I was dismayed by what I saw. The once immaculate front garden was overgrown with weeds, and the dogwood trees needed pruning. Paint was peeling from the front door, and one of the porch railings appeared to be broken. Timothy answered my knock, his face brightening at the sight of me. Grandma, did Mom know you were coming? I thought I'd surprise you all, I said, stepping inside. The interior was equally disappointing. Clutter covered most surfaces. There was a large water stain on the ceiling in the entryway, and a distinctive mustiness suggested poor ventilation. Stephanie emerged from the kitchen, looking surprised and not entirely pleased to see me. Mom, we weren't expecting you. I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by, I said, the traditional excuse for unexpected visits. Is everything okay with the house? I noticed some issues outside. What? Oh, the garden. Yes, we've been meaning to deal with that. It's just so much work, and the landscapers around here charge a fortune. She waved dismissively. And the porch rail broke during Robert's poker night last week. He'll fix it eventually. I'd be happy to help with some repairs, I offered. And the garden wouldn't take long to tidy up if we worked together. Stephanie's expression tightened. We don't need your help, Mom. We can manage our own home. Of course you can, I backpedaled. I just thought it might be nice to garden together like we talked about. I've been too busy for gardening, she said flatly. We've had a lot of social obligations since moving here. During my visit, I noticed more concerning signs of neglect throughout the house. A leaking faucet, cracked tiles in the bathroom, scuffed hardwood floors that hadn't been properly maintained. The beautiful home I had lovingly cared for was showing signs of deterioration after just 6 months in their possession. More concerning was what I discovered through innocent conversation with Timothy. While helping him with a school project in his room, I commented on a photo of him at a beach I didn't recognize. Where was that taken, sweetheart? That's from our trip to Hawaii last month, he said casually. Dad said we deserved a vacation after all the stress of moving. I blinked in surprise. Hawaii? They had never mentioned this trip to me, and it certainly didn't align with their complaints about maintenance costs and property taxes. When I gently probed further, Timothy revealed they had also taken weekend trips to Las Vegas and wine country in recent months. Later, when I mentioned I had heard about their Hawaii vacation from Timothy, Stephanie became defensive. Are you monitoring our spending now? She snapped. We're adults, Mom. We can decide how to use our money. I'm not monitoring anything, I said calmly. I was just surprised you hadn't mentioned such a big trip. Well, we can't tell you everything, she retorted. And yes, we've been traveling a bit. Robert needed a break from work stress, And having a home base here has allowed us to free up money for experiences. Isn't that what you always said was important? Experiences over things. I had indeed said that, but in the context of choosing to take Timothy to museums and parks rather than buying him excessive toys, not neglecting home maintenance while taking luxury vacations. That evening, Stephanie made it clear my visit was becoming an imposition. As I prepared to leave, she said something that truly wounded me. "Mom, I think it's better if you call before coming over in the future. We have a busy social calendar, and unexpected visits are a bit disruptive." "Of course," I said, hiding my hurt. "I should have called first. And maybe limit your visits to once a month or so. We're trying to establish ourselves in this community, and we need space to develop our own social connections." I nodded, speechless at the realization that my daughter was essentially restricting my access to the home I had given her, the home where I had been promised a room of my own anytime. As I drove away that evening, I couldn't help but wonder if I had made a terrible mistake in giving them the house without any conditions or expectations. But surely things wouldn't deteriorate further. This was just an adjustment period, I told myself. They were establishing boundaries, which was healthy, even if the way Stephanie had expressed them felt hurtful. I resolved to respect their space and give them time to settle into their roles as homeowners. Surely with time they would come to appreciate both the gift and the giver more fully. How naive I was. 3 months passed, during which I honored Stephanie's request for less frequent visits. I called before coming over and limited my stays to a couple of hours, never questioning their lifestyle choices or commenting on the home's continuing deterioration. It was difficult to bite my tongue when I saw expensive new electronics appearing while basic maintenance remained undone, but I reminded myself that they were adults making their own choices. One Saturday morning I decided to surprise them with homemade cookies, Timothy's favorite snickerdoodles, hoping to rebuild some of the warmth that had been lost between us. I had texted Stephanie the day before mentioning I might stop by, and she had responded with a non-committal, "Maybe let me check our schedule," which I took as tentative permission. When I arrived around 11 in the morning, I noticed an unfamiliar car in the driveway but thought nothing of it. Perhaps Robert had purchased yet another vehicle. I knocked on the door, cookie tin in hand, excited to see Timothy if nothing else. A stranger answered the door. A young woman in her 20s wearing lounge clothes as if she were very much at home. "Can I help you?" she asked, clearly confused by my presence. "I'm Eleanor Hayes, Stephanie's mother," I explained. "Is she home?" "Oh, you're Stephanie's mom. I'm Melissa, I rent the downstairs bedroom." She stepped back to let me in. "Stephanie's in the kitchen. Rent the downstairs bedroom?" This was the first I'd heard of them taking in a tenant. As I walked through the living room, I noticed subtle changes suggesting this wasn't a temporary arrangement. The downstairs study that had once been filled with Timothy's toys now had a futon and dresser, clearly serving as someone's bedroom. In the kitchen, I found Stephanie making coffee while chatting with a young man I'd never seen before. "Mom!" she exclaimed when she saw me, not quite managing to hide her annoyance. "I didn't confirm you could visit today. I brought cookies for Timothy," I said, lifting the tin slightly. "I won't stay long." The young man extended his hand. "I'm Jake, nice to meet you. I rent the garage apartment."
Garage apartment?
The property had a detached garage with a small storage space above it, but it certainly wasn't an apartment when I had owned the house. They must have converted it, which would have required significant work they apparently had money for, unlike the basic maintenance the main house needed. "You didn't mention you were renting out rooms," I said carefully, trying to keep my tone neutral. Stephanie shrugged. "It helps cover the property taxes and maintenance you're always worried about. Robert and I are being smart about our investment." The way she said "our investment" made my stomach tighten. Before I could respond, Timothy bounded into the kitchen, his face lighting up at the sight of me and the cookie tin. "Grandma! You brought snickerdoodles." He hugged me tightly, and for a moment everything else faded away. "Why don't you take those to your room, Timothy?" Stephanie suggested in a tone that made it clear this wasn't really a suggestion. "Grandma and I need to talk." Once Timothy had left, clutching his treasure, Stephanie's demeanor changed completely. She crossed her arms and leaned against the counter, her expression hard. "You can't just show up here whenever you feel like it, Mom. We have a life." I texted you yesterday, I reminded her. And I didn't confirm. Look, the thing is. She exchanged a glance with Robert, who had just entered the kitchen. We've been meaning to talk to you about this. Since we're renting out rooms now, your constant visits are becoming a bit of an issue. Constant visits? I've been here twice in the past 3 months, I pointed out. It's not just about frequency, Robert interjected, his tone condescending. It's about respecting that this is our home now, not yours. I'm well aware of who owns the house, I said, feeling heat rise to my face. Are you? Stephanie challenged. Because you still act like you have rights to come and go as you please. Our tenants pay good money for privacy and a certain living environment. I took a deep breath, trying to process what I was hearing. I gave you this house as a gift because I wanted to provide security for your family. I never imagined you'd be renting it out to strangers while the property itself falls into disrepair. That's exactly the problem, Stephanie snapped. You gave us this house, but you still think you have a say in what we do with it. You're using your generosity to control us. Control you? How am I controlling you by occasionally visiting my grandson? It's more than that, and you know it, Robert said. Your disapproving looks when you see the house, your comments about maintenance. It's all passive-aggressive judgment. I was stunned into silence. How had my well-intentioned gift become this source of resentment and accusation? Stephanie straightened up, a determined look on her face. So we've made a decision. If you want to visit our home, you'll need to pay rent like everyone else. I thought I must have misheard her. I'm sorry, what? You heard me. If you want visiting privileges, you'll pay $1,500 a month. The amount hit me like a physical blow.
$1,500?
To visit my own daughter and grandson in the house I gave you. The house you gave us, Stephanie emphasized. Which means it's ours to do with as we please. You can afford it, Mom. We know you have plenty of money saved up. This isn't about whether I can afford it, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. This is about respect and gratitude. Oh, here we go. Robert rolled his eyes. The gratitude lecture. We've thanked you 1,000 times for the house. What more do you want? A lifetime of servitude. Robert, I gasped, shocked by his hostility. Don't Robert me, he snapped. We're setting boundaries here. $1,500 a month if you want to visit, or you can just stay away. Your choice. Stephanie's face was flushed with anger now, all pretense of civil discussion gone. You will pay me $1,500 a month or stop coming over, she practically screamed. That's the deal. Take it or leave it. I looked at my daughter, my only child whom I had raised alone, sacrificed for, and loved unconditionally, and saw a stranger. In her eyes, I saw only entitlement and greed, not a shred of the loving girl I had raised. From the doorway came a small gasp. Timothy stood there, cookie crumbs on his shirt, his eyes wide with shock and embarrassment. Mom, how could you talk to Grandma like that? He whispered. Go to your room, Timothy. This doesn't concern you, Stephanie ordered. But the damage was done. I couldn't bear another moment in that house, the house that had become a symbol not of my love, but of my daughter's avarice. Without another word, I turned and walked toward the door. I heard Timothy call after me, but I couldn't stop. I needed air, space, distance from the toxic environment that had developed in what was once my cherished home. As I reached my car, Timothy ran out after me, tears streaming down his face. Grandma, please don't go. They don't mean it. Please don't stop visiting me. I knelt down despite my aching knees and hugged him tightly. I will never stop being your grandmother, Timothy. Never. This isn't goodbye. And with that promise made, I drove away, my heart shattered but my mind finally clear about what needed to be done. The drive home passed in a blur of tears and disbelief. How had things gone so terribly wrong? The house I had given with love had become a weapon used against me. The daughter I had sacrificed everything for now saw me as nothing more than a potential source of income. Once home, I sat in my silent living room, too stunned to even cry anymore. My phone buzzed repeatedly with texts from Timothy, but nothing from Stephanie or Robert. I couldn't bring myself to read any messages yet, needing time to process the brutal confrontation. After several hours of emotional turmoil, I made a decision. I would not allow myself to be treated this way, regardless of my daughter's demands. But what options did I have? The house was legally theirs now. Or was it? The next morning I called Barbara Thompson, my former colleague who had handled the property transfer. Now retired from Hartford real estate, Barbara had established her own legal practice specializing in property law. "Eleanor, what a pleasant surprise." Barbara greeted me warmly when we met at her office. "How are Stephanie and Robert enjoying the house?" "That's actually why I'm here," I said, explaining the entire situation, the neglect of the property, the renting of rooms, and finally, the outrageous demand for payment to visit. Barbara's expression grew increasingly grave as I spoke. When I finished, she shook her head in disbelief. "I've seen family disputes over property before, but this is particularly troubling," she said. "Let me review the deed transfer documents. There might be something we can work with." She pulled up the files on her computer and began scanning through them carefully. After several minutes, she looked up with a gleam in her eye. "Eleanor, do you remember when we were preparing these documents, there was an issue with the property description?" I frowned, trying to recall. "Vaguely. Something about the lot dimensions." "Exactly. The legal description in the deed referenced outdated property boundaries from before you had purchased the adjacent strip of land to expand the garden. We noted it at the time and planned to file a corrected deed, but..." She scrolled through more documents, then looked up triumphantly. "It appears that correction was never filed." "What does that mean?" I asked, a flicker of hope igniting. "It means the deed transfer is technically incomplete and potentially voidable. The property description must accurately reflect the actual property being transferred. This error creates what we call a cloud on the title, an irregularity that affects the legal status of ownership." "So the house isn't legally theirs?" I asked, hardly daring to believe it. "It's complicated," Barbara cautioned, "but this gives us grounds to petition for reclamation based on an incomplete transfer. Given that they've already altered the property use from single-family to multi-unit rental without proper zoning permits, we have additional leverage." Over the next week, I met with Barbara several more times as she developed a legal strategy. I also consulted with my financial advisor, Martin Goldstein, to understand the financial implications of reclaiming the property. "If you get the house back, what will you do with it?" Martin asked during our meeting. It was a question I had pondered extensively. "Sell it," I said firmly. "I can't keep it now, too many painful associations, but I can use the proceeds to secure Timothy's future education, and perhaps help a family who will truly appreciate it." Martin nodded approvingly. "That sounds like a healthy plan. And financially speaking, recovering an asset of that value would significantly enhance your estate planning options." The decision to pursue legal action wasn't made lightly. Each night I tossed and turned, plagued by doubts and what-ifs. What if this permanently destroyed my relationship with Stephanie? What if Timothy suffered as a result of the conflict? What if I was overreacting to a situation that could be resolved through better communication? These questions led me to schedule an appointment with Dr. Marlene Jensen, a therapist specializing in family dynamics. During our first session, I poured out the entire story, still feeling guilty about considering legal action against my own daughter. "Eleanor," Dr. Jensen said gently after listening to my account, "you're describing a pattern of escalating entitlement and emotional manipulation. Your gift was met not with sustained gratitude, but with increasing demands and disrespect." "But she's my daughter," I whispered. "My only child." "Yes, and you love her. That's evident in everything you've done for her. But sometimes loving someone means setting firm boundaries and allowing them to experience the consequences of their actions. Your daughter is an adult making choices that hurt you and potentially harm her own son by modeling extremely problematic values." Over several sessions, Dr. Jensen helped me understand that enabling Stephanie's entitled behavior wouldn't ultimately help her or Timothy. By reclaiming the property, I wasn't just standing up for myself. I was potentially creating an opportunity for my daughter to develop greater personal responsibility. My sister Margaret, who had witnessed Stephanie's increasing entitlement over the years, provided additional moral support. "You've always given that girl everything," Margaret said during one of our long phone conversations, "and instead of appreciating it, she just expects more." Sometimes people need to lose something to understand its value. With this emotional reinforcement, I gave Barbara the green light to proceed with legal action. She filed the necessary paperwork to initiate reclamation of the property, based on the defective deed transfer, and included a notice about the unauthorized conversion to a multi-unit rental property in violation of local zoning laws. As a parallel action, I contacted a real estate agent to evaluate the property's current market value and list it for sale contingent on the successful legal outcome. Given the neighborhood's desirability, the agent was confident we could achieve a sale price of around $700,000 despite the deferred maintenance. Properties in that area are moving quickly, she assured me. Even with some needed repairs, you shouldn't have trouble finding buyers. Throughout this process, I maintained contact with Timothy through texts and occasional calls when his parents weren't around. I never disparaged Stephanie or Robert to him, simply assuring him that I loved him and that adult problems sometimes took time to resolve. The most difficult part was knowing that once Stephanie received the legal notice, all hell would break loose. Barbara had warned me to prepare for an explosive reaction. Based on what you've told me about their response to reasonable boundaries, they're likely to become extremely hostile when served with these papers, she cautioned. You might want to consider staying with your sister temporarily, or at least installing additional security at your home. I declined the suggestion to leave my home, but did have a security system installed, and informed my neighbors about the potential for disturbance. Warren and Betty Jenkins, the couple next door who had known me for decades, promised to keep an eye out and call the police if they saw anything concerning. You've been nothing but generous to that girl, Betty said firmly. It's about time someone taught her about consequences. The waiting period after the papers were filed was excruciating. Each day I expected the storm to break, jumping whenever the phone rang or a car door slammed outside. But life continued in an uneasy limbo for nearly 2 weeks. Then came the morning when everything changed. My real estate agent called with unexpected news. Eleanor, you won't believe this. We've received an offer on the house sight unseen. But how is that possible? I asked confused. The listing was contingent on the legal proceedings. The buyers are a young doctor and her husband with 2 small children. They drove by the property, fell in love with the neighborhood, and want to submit an offer immediately, legal complications and all. They're willing to wait out the process and are offering $690,000 with minimal contingencies. They understand the situation might take time to resolve, but are prepared to be patient. It seemed almost too good to be true. A young family who would truly appreciate the home, willing to navigate the complicated situation I found myself in. I authorized my agent to proceed with the offer, knowing it would strengthen my position in the upcoming confrontation with Stephanie and Robert. That confrontation, when it finally came, would be even more explosive than I had anticipated. The legal notice was delivered on a Tuesday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, my phone was exploding with calls and texts from Stephanie, each message more hostile than the last. I had prepared for this moment, following Barbara's advice to avoid direct contact until the initial emotional reaction had subsided. Do not answer your phone, Barbara had instructed firmly. Let everything go to voicemail. Document everything. If they show up at your house, do not open the door unless you feel completely safe doing so. By Wednesday evening, the messages had escalated from disbelief. Is this some kind of joke? To rage, you conniving manipulative witch. To threats, you'll never see Timothy again. Robert's voice appeared in several voicemails, his tone menacing as he promised serious consequences if I didn't immediately withdraw the legal action. I listened to each message with a curious detachment, as if they were being directed at someone else. The venom in my daughter's voice should have devastated me, but instead it only confirmed that I was making the right decision. The person leaving those messages wasn't the daughter I had raised. Or perhaps more painfully, she revealed aspects of my daughter that I had willfully ignored for too long. On Thursday morning, just as I was finishing breakfast, I heard tires screeching in my driveway. Through the window, I saw Stephanie's car parked at an angle, and both she and Robert storming toward my front door. I took a deep breath, checked that my phone was recording as Barbara had suggested, and steeled myself for the confrontation. The pounding on my door was so violent that the entire frame shook. Open this door right now, Mother. Stephanie screamed, her voice nearly unrecognizable with rage. I opened the door but remained standing firmly in the doorway, blocking entry. Stephanie, Robert. I'm willing to talk, but only if you can be civil. Civil? Stephanie shrieked. You're trying to steal our house and you want us to be civil? Robert pushed forward, his face inches from mine. You've really done it this time, Eleanor. You think you can play games with lawyers? We'll destroy you in court. I'm not playing games, I said calmly. The deed transfer was legally flawed, and you violated zoning laws by converting the property to a multi-unit rental. These are facts, not games. It's our house, Stephanie shouted, attempting to push past me into the living room. You gave it to us. You can't take it back because you're jealous that we're making money from it. This isn't about money, I maintained, standing my ground. This is about respect and responsibility. You've neglected the property, exploited my gift, and then had the audacity to demand payment from me to visit my own grandson. Oh, cry me a river, Robert sneered. You're just a controlling old woman who can't stand that we found a way to profit from your so-called generosity. What did you expect us to do? Live like paupers in a big house we can barely afford to maintain. I expected gratitude, respect, and responsible stewardship, I replied. Instead, you've taken luxury vacations while neglecting basic maintenance, rented the property illegally, and treated me with contempt. Stephanie's face contorted with rage. You want to talk about respect? How respectful is it to give someone a gift and then snatch it back? You're nothing but a liar and a hypocrite. I've consulted with multiple attorneys, I said, maintaining my composure with effort. The deed transfer was legally flawed. The courts will decide, but I have every right to protect my interests and correct this situation. You'll regret this, Robert threatened, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You think you'll ever see Timothy again after this stunt? Think again. We'll make sure he knows exactly what kind of selfish, manipulative grandmother he has. That threat, using my beloved grandson as a weapon, nearly broke my calm facade. But I remembered Dr. Jensen's words about not engaging with emotional manipulation. Timothy is a perceptive boy, I said quietly. He'll draw his own conclusions based on everyone's actions, not just their words. This seemed to enrage Stephanie further. He's our son. We decide who he sees and when. You have no rights here. Actually, I've already consulted with a family law attorney about grandparent visitation rights, I countered, a contingency plan Barbara had suggested. But I'd prefer not to go that route if we can resolve this situation like adults. Robert took a threatening step forward. You think you're so clever with your lawyers and your legal loopholes. We have friends too, Eleanor. Important friends who can make your life very difficult. I stood my ground, though my heart was pounding. Are you threatening me, Robert? Take it however you want, he snarled. But know this. We will fight you with everything we have. You'll spend every penny you've saved on legal fees, and in the end, you'll lose everything, including your precious grandson. The confrontation might have escalated further if not for Warren Jenkins, who had been mowing his lawn and noticed the commotion. He approached my porch, garden shears still in hand. Everything okay here, Eleanor? He called, his expression making it clear he was prepared to intervene if necessary. These are my daughter and son-in-law, I explained. We're having a disagreement about a legal matter. Sounds like more than a disagreement from where I'm standing, Warren observed. Maybe you folks should continue this discussion inside, more quietly, or perhaps with your lawyers present. Robert glared at Warren but seemed to realize that creating a public scene would only hurt their position. This isn't over, he muttered to me. Not by a long shot. We're leaving, Stephanie announced coldly. But don't think for a second we're giving up. That house is ours, and we'll do whatever it takes to keep it. As they stormed back to their car, Stephanie turned for one final barb. You'll die alone, Mother. Remember that when you're sitting in your empty house counting your money. With that parting shot, they drove away, tires squealing on the asphalt. Warren stayed until they were gone, then turned to me with concern. Should I call the police, Eleanor? That looked pretty intense. No, but thank you for intervening, I said, suddenly feeling exhausted. I think they'll cool down now that they've vented their anger. I was wrong about that. The following day, I discovered Stephanie had launched a vicious social media campaign against me, portraying herself as the victim of a greedy, controlling mother who had cruelly reclaimed a gift. Her posts, filled with selective truth and outright fabrications, quickly garnered sympathetic comments from friends and acquaintances who knew only her version of events. My own mother gave us a house as a gift, only to steal it back the moment we made it our own, she wrote. Now we're facing homelessness because an elderly woman can't stand to see her adult daughter happy and independent. The public shaming was painful, especially when I saw former colleagues and friends expressing support for Stephanie without ever asking for my side of the story. But Barbara advised me to refrain from responding publicly. Let your actions speak for themselves, she counseled. Engaging in a social media war will only escalate the situation and potentially harm your legal position. Instead, I focused on moving forward with both the legal proceedings and the pending sale. The young family who had made the offer, Dr. Rachel Collins and her husband Mark, reached out through their attorney to express their continued interest despite the complications. We understand family situations can be complex, their note read. We're patient and still very interested in making this our forever home when the legal matters are resolved. Their understanding provided a bright spot during this difficult time. I began to imagine their children playing in the garden I had lovingly tended, creating new memories in a home that deserved to be filled with genuine love and appreciation. Meanwhile, my friends and former colleagues from Hartford real estate rallied around me once they heard the full story. Many had witnessed Stephanie's entitled behavior over the years and were not surprised by the current situation. That girl has been taking advantage of your generosity for decades, my former assistant Diane declared during a supportive lunch. It's about time she learned that actions have consequences. The most painful aspect of the entire ordeal was the separation from Timothy. As Robert had threatened, they immediately cut off all contact between us. My texts went unanswered, my calls straight to voicemail. I sent letters that were returned unopened. Then, about 3 weeks after the confrontation, I received an unexpected visitor. Timothy stood on my doorstep after school, his backpack slung over one shoulder. "Timothy," I exclaimed, overjoyed but concerned. "Does your mother know you're here?" He shook his head. "I took the bus after school. Mom and Dad are at work until 6. I needed to see you, Grandma." I ushered him inside, my heart breaking at the worry evident on his young face. "Everything's so awful at home," he confided as we sat at the kitchen table with cookies and milk. "Mom cries and screams all the time. Dad keeps saying they're going to destroy you in court. The renters moved out because of all the fighting." "I'm so sorry you're caught in the middle of this," I said, reaching for his hand. "None of this is your fault, Timothy. Sometimes adults have complicated problems that take time to resolve." "But why are you taking the house back?" he asked directly. "Mom says you're being selfish and cruel." I considered how to explain the situation in terms a 10-year-old could understand without disparaging his parents. "When I gave your parents the house, I did it out of love, with the hope that it would provide security and happiness for your family. But there were problems with the legal paperwork, and your parents made some choices with the house that weren't allowed by law. More importantly, they asked me to pay money to visit you, which hurt me deeply." Timothy nodded slowly. "I heard them that day. It wasn't right, what they said to you." "Adult relationships can be complicated," I said, careful not to encourage him to take sides. "I still love your mother very much, and I love you more than anything. Whatever happens with the house, that will never change." We spent an hour together before I insisted on driving him home, knowing his parents would be worried despite their anger toward me. When we pulled up to the house, my former house, I noticed the once beautiful garden was now completely neglected, and a broken window on the second floor had been haphazardly covered with plastic. "Can I still see you sometimes?" Timothy asked as he prepared to get out of the car. "I hope so, sweetheart. I'm working with lawyers to make sure that happens. But for now, it's important that you respect your parents' wishes. I don't want to cause more problems for you." As he walked up the path to the front door, I felt both heartbreak and determination. This painful situation had revealed difficult truths about my daughter, but it had also shown me the strength of character in my grandson. Whatever happened with the house, Ensuring a relationship with Timothy would remain my priority. 6 months passed before the legal matters were fully resolved. The court ultimately ruled in my favor, citing both the defective deed transfer and the unauthorized conversion to a multi-unit rental property. The judgment required Stephanie and Robert to vacate the premises within 30 days, a ruling they appealed but ultimately lost. Throughout this period, I maintained minimal contact with them, communicating only through our respective attorneys. The emotional distance, while painful, provided clarity I had never before experienced regarding my relationship with my daughter. With Dr. Jensen's continued guidance, I came to understand that my enabling behavior had contributed to Stephanie's sense of entitlement. "You've always been the giver and she the taker," Dr. Jensen observed during one of our sessions. That dynamic became so entrenched that she lost the ability to recognize generosity for what it was, instead seeing it as her due. The sale to Der. Rachel Collins and her husband Mark proceeded smoothly once the legal obstacles were cleared. They purchased the property for $690,000, expressing delight despite the condition issues that had developed during Stephanie and Robert's tenure. "We're planning a complete renovation," Rachel told me during our one meeting at the closing. "We want to restore the house to its original beauty, while making it work for our family's needs." I found myself sharing the home's history with her. The garden's seasonal blooming schedule, the quirks of the heating system, the best spot to watch sunsets from the back porch. It felt like passing along family wisdom to someone who would truly appreciate it. "Thank you for choosing us," Rachel said as we parted. "We promise to love this home as much as you did." With the proceeds from the sale, I established 3 separate funds. The largest portion, for $100,000, I placed in a trust for Timothy's education, structured so that neither Stephanie nor Robert could access the funds for any other purpose. Another $100,000 I donated to establish a housing assistance program for single mothers in our community, working with a local nonprofit organization. The remaining funds I set aside for my own retirement security, and somewhat surprisingly, for legal expenses related to securing grandparent visitation rights. Barbara had warned me this might be necessary given Stephanie and Robert's vindictiveness. "Grandparent rights vary by state," she explained, "but given the established relationship you had with Timothy and evidence that cutting contact is harmful to him, we have a solid case." Indeed, shortly after Stephanie and Robert were forced to move to a modest apartment across town, I received a court date for a hearing regarding visitation rights. To my shock, Timothy appeared at the hearing, having convinced the judge to allow him to speak despite his young age. "My grandma is the most important person in my life after my parents," he stated with remarkable poise for an 11-year-old. "She teaches me things my parents don't, like responsibility and thinking about others. I need her in my life." His testimony, combined with evidence of our prior close relationship, convinced the judge to grant me regular visitation rights, 1 weekend per month and weekly phone calls, with additional time during school breaks. Stephanie refused to look at me during the entire hearing, but as we exited the courtroom, I overheard her say to Robert, "We wouldn't be in this humiliating position if we just let her visit for free." It was the closest thing to an acknowledgement of wrongdoing I would likely ever receive from her. The trust fund for Timothy's education proved to be a turning point. As Stephanie and Robert struggled to adjust to a significantly reduced lifestyle, the reality that their son's future education was secured, but completely beyond their control, forced them to reconsider their perspective. 6 months after the final court ruling, I received an unexpected call from Stephanie. "Mom," she began awkwardly, "Timothy's graduation from elementary school is next week. He wants you there. Would you come?" It was a small olive branch, but I accepted it gratefully. Of course. I wouldn't miss it. The graduation ceremony was held in the school gymnasium, with proud families crowding the bleachers. I sat apart from Stephanie and Robert, but Timothy beamed at me from the stage, giving me a special wave when he received his certificate. Afterward, as families mingled in the reception area, Timothy led me over to where his parents stood. "Can Grandma come to lunch with us?" he asked hopefully. An uncomfortable silence fell. Robert looked away, but Stephanie, after a moment's hesitation, nodded. "If she wants to." That lunch was strained, conversation limited to safe topics like Timothy's accomplishments and plans for middle school. But it was a beginning. a tiny crack in the wall of resentment Stephanie had built. In the year that followed, our relationship thawed incrementally. Stephanie and Robert remained distant and somewhat hostile, but they no longer actively prevented Timothy from seeing me. When Timothy spent weekends at my home, I was careful never to criticize his parents or mention the house situation, focusing instead on building positive memories and teaching him the values I held dear. I found new purpose in my volunteer work with the housing assistance program I had established. Named New Beginnings Housing Initiative, the program helped single mothers secure stable housing through rent assistance, homebuyer education, and low-interest loans. Each time we helped a family move into a safe, affordable home, I thought of my own struggles as a young widow with Stephanie. Perhaps the most healing aspect of this difficult journey was watching the Collins family breathe new life into my former home. Rachel occasionally sent photos of their renovation progress and later, of their children playing in the revitalized garden. The house was fulfilling its purpose, providing security and joy to a family who truly appreciated it. 2 years after the court battle, I received another unexpected call from Stephanie. "Mom," she said, her voice uncharacteristically humble, "I need your advice. We're thinking about buying a small house. Nothing fancy, just something we can actually afford. But I don't know anything about mortgages or property taxes or maintenance costs. I was wondering if you could help us figure it out." It was the closest thing to an admission that she had been unprepared for homeownership before, and an acknowledgement that my knowledge and experience had value. "I'd be happy to help," I said, hearing the olive branch being extended further. That weekend, we sat at my dining room table with mortgage calculators, property listings, and budget worksheets. Robert remained aloof, but Stephanie engaged earnestly, asking questions and taking notes. "How did you manage all this as a single mom?" she asked at one point, genuine curiosity in her voice. "One day at a time," I answered honestly, "and a lot of sacrifices you never saw." Something shifted in her expression then, a glimmer of understanding perhaps, or the beginning of true appreciation for what I had provided her. By the time Timothy entered high school, our family had established a new normal. Stephanie and Robert purchased a modest 2-bedroom home within their means, managing it responsibly with occasional advice from me. Our relationship remained complicated, but the raw hostility had evolved into something resembling mutual respect. The Christmas after Timothy turned 15, Stephanie invited me to their home for dinner, the first such invitation since the house debacle. As we gathered around their small dining table, I noticed Timothy watching his mother and me with hopeful eyes. After dinner, while Robert and Timothy cleared the dishes, Stephanie turned to me with an expression I hadn't seen since she was a young girl. "I've been unfair to you," she said quietly. "It took me a long time to see it, but you were right about the house. We weren't ready for that responsibility, and we didn't appreciate what we had until we lost it." I reached for her hand across the table. "We all make mistakes, Stephanie. What matters is how we learn from them." "I'm trying," she admitted. "It's not easy starting over in our 40s, building from scratch what we should have been building all along. But Timothy deserves parents he can respect, not just parents who give him things." Her words healed something deep within me, not because she had admitted I was right, but because she was finally embracing the values I had always tried to instill. Responsibility, gratitude, and the understanding that true security comes not from what you're given, but from what you earn through your own efforts. The following spring, Stephanie surprised me by volunteering alongside me at the New Beginnings Housing Initiative's community garden project. As we planted tomatoes side by side, she asked thoughtful questions about the program and the families it served. "Maybe I could help with the financial literacy workshops," she offered tentatively. "I've learned a lot of hard lessons about money management." "That would be wonderful," I said, seeing the potential for her difficult experience to benefit others. Today, at 73, I look back on the house incident not as a failure but as a painful but necessary correction in my family's journey. Timothy, now in college with the support of the trust fund, has developed into a compassionate, responsible young man who understands the value of both generosity and boundaries. Stephanie and I will never have the uncomplicated relationship I once dreamed of, but we have something perhaps more valuable. A relationship based on reality rather than obligation, on earned respect rather than expected compliance. The house that once divided us has long since become a home for the Collins family, who send me a Christmas card each year showing their growing children and blooming garden. I keep these cards not as reminders of what I lost, but as evidence that doing the right thing, however painful, creates ripples of positive change that extend far beyond ourselves. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have taken the house back or found another solution? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video if my story resonated with you. Remember, sometimes the most loving gift we can give is not a house or money, but the courage to establish healthy boundaries. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you wisdom and strength in your own family relationships.